Hello, everybody. I'm Brooks Page again with part 2 of Money Talks, and welcome to our show again. Christy Dwyer and Aaron Dwyer with Exit Realty. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Thanks again.
Okay. I think at the end of the show, we're talking about the solution. We need solutions around here. And the solution is we got too big of a demand and not enough supply, and you were talking about it, Aaron. Keep on flowing, baby.
So I think we were talking about, the sort of the double-edged, the sword of the two sides and the growth here in Hart County and what the solution was. And I think we left off and I was talking about a building inspector and how I thought that was a great first step to sort of managing some of that growth. I think another good step would obviously be, I do think the commissioners are trying to get this done and get this through where they want some common sense approaches to the ordinances so that when somebody does come in, that they have to meet these guidelines. And I think that's fantastic.
Right.
I think it needs to be done the right way. And I think the right way is, obviously we've got pieces in place with the environmental, with the septic, the septic systems and how those work with the state and the county. And then I think, for me, I would think vetting the builders and having the builders have to, know where they come from, know what they've done before. What are the products? Is this their first time? Yeah. Are they flipping this? Are they building a spec house? Where else have you built these spec houses? Let's go see some of those. Yeah. I think there's some common sense approaches to this to ensure that the residents of Hart County get exactly what they want and get what they need.
Right.
Because what they don't need is to not be able to find a house.
Right. Well, and I think one of the things is, and you asked this in the last show, is do you have to have a general contractor in order to build a house here? And I think if the building inspector thing comes in and they get that in place, requiring a general contractor to oversee and to be, then their license is on the line.
They're on the hook.
They've got to be bonded. They've got to have things that are going to, you can't help if a junky framer comes in, but that general contractor, even though he's not the one framing it up, he's overseeing it and he's responsible for it. Just like with the real estate commission. I'm ultimately responsible for everything that my agents do that are operating under our firm.
Right.
So, ultimately you've got somebody who has had to go through the education, has had to pass the test, they got to be bond, they've got things in place in order to get that license. Right. So if you're allowing people to come in here and build homes in the county that don't have a general contractor's license, that's probably a much better moratorium, in my opinion, is that you can't pull a building permit unless you're a general contractor.
Right. Because I think a big piece to that too is when the car breaks down, if the engine breaks down, you don't take the tires off of it. Right. That's not helping. You got to find out what made the engine break down because it has nothing to do with the tires.
Right.
So I think addressing the problem is the right thing to do, but don't make something else a problem that's not a problem right now.
Right. Right.
And I think, and I don't know if this is because I'm not familiar with me being from Tennessee. I'm not intimately familiar with Georgia's building codes, but in Tennessee, every licensed contractor has to offer a builder's home warranty. And then that buyer, when they buy that new construction, they have a builder's home warranty that covers the basic structure and things in the house.
Right.
It's a fantastic thing.
Right.
So that's another great. I guess we never even talked about that. Making them be a GC, make the person that comes in to pull the permit for the home, make them be a GC. Right. Make the builder be a GC. That solves a lot of this.
Yeah. A lot of things that did help was the banks now, most banks, and maybe a few banks out there, they require the customer, or the borrower, if they're going to build a house, that the builder has to have the builder's license. So I think that's a good thing. And that keeps...
and that's if you're doing a construction loan. Yeah. Which is completely different than what the issue is, I think, that they're concerned with. Right. Is that what they're trying to put this moratorium on is, and some of the issues that were raised in the meeting the other night were not necessarily for the people who are coming in and having a builder build them a custom home, because that homeowner is literally there throughout the entire process, checking every night they're driving by and seeing what's happening. That's not what they're talking about with this. I don't think that's what's causing the issues in the county now. But if we don't have the speculation building allowed to still be happening with bona fide, valid, reputable builders who have a GC, who can provide a new home warranty, those kinds of things. If you don't have those, then you've, again, almost made a new home out of reach for a lot of your home buyers right now, because they can't afford to put 20% down. They can't afford to do the construction part and pay for the land up front and do all those things.
Right.
So,
yeah. We were talking earlier, I know they're talking at the commissioner's office, commissioner's meeting about two things, tiny houses and container houses. Well, of course, I know what a tiny house is, but I got to think now, what is a container house? And then you brought up a few photos of some, and they actually look good. I couldn't believe it. I thought when you were talking about a container house, it would be something.
Living in a box?
Yeah, something.
Well, it's kind of living in a box.
It's kind of like living in a box. It's just a really, really nice box.
They're fancy boxes.
They actually look really good.
Yeah. Yeah. I've seen some incredible container houses.
Of course, I'm not a proponent of either.
Right.
They just, again, there were things that were mentioned. And obviously, with Hart County, we talked about this earlier, with the influx of new industry coming here, you've got people who come to Hart County who aren't from Georgia. They're not from Hart County. They're not from Georgia. And there are other locations all over the country where there are people that live in tiny houses about the size of this desk. And they have other people that find different ways to build housing. Again, housing is in such high demand that people are finding alternatives to this housing problem.
Right.
And so with the internet and with information and people doing this all over the world, they're like, well, we could do this. And then some folks go do it and they like it. I mean, I know of tons of companies, commercial companies, who sell these Connex trailers as office spaces. And they'll stack them as offices and they'll put mezzanines around them, and they're their offices.
Right.
So,
also, I noticed they were talking at the commissioners' meeting about builders putting in subdivisions and breaking the lots up and restricting some of them, but not restricting, putting restricted covenants in on some of them, but not all of them. But I always thought if you did that, you had to do all of them. But they were talking about they would do 2 or 3 lots maybe, and then all of a sudden change unless I misunderstood, which I probably did, and then sold those 3, and then changed some of the covenant restrictions on the other ones as they sold them, which to me is not fair to the ones that bought them.
I would be in complete agreement with you that would be unfair to have these 3 with a different set of restricted
maybe I
covenants than these 3.
misunderstood that. Maybe.
Well, and I don't know what all the backstory is on that. I think that had come up at a previous meeting, and that I haven't really. But I think that what they're talking about is they're wanting to have a master covenant, which is typically what happens when they have a master covenant. I mean, is that typically when somebody goes in and they develop a subdivision, okay? Here's where the problem is. And we saw this happen back in 2006, 2007, 2008, is that whenever a bank, and I'm going to defer to you on this, when a bank does a loan, so let's say we find a piece of property, you find a piece of property, and you're like, I want to buy it and I'm going to develop it. You're the developer. And they go in and they borrow the money from the bank. And they go in and they get all the money up front and they borrow the money for that piece of property from the bank. And the bank does it, they secure it, that land as collateral, okay? And that developer goes through and he does the whole thing and he builds the houses and he sells 3 houses in there, okay? And he develops it, he does all that stuff and he records the covenants and all these things. And then the builder, that developer goes belly up because the subdivision stopped and didn't sell, okay? And the bank takes all that property back.
Right.
That land, those covenants that were recorded on that property revert back to the date that security deed was secured on that property. So those covenants no longer even apply to that property if the bank takes it back. Because the bank cannot be held subject to those covenants because those covenants were not on the property when they pledged that collateral to secure their loan.
Yeah.
So if the bank takes it back and it gets foreclosed, even if they did all that, those covenants don't go away. They can't. A master covenant plan isn't going to fix that problem.
Yeah.
And that's where probably even I think the subdivision that was in question was North Point out in Reed Creek, and that subdivision originally started way back when, and it was a guy, I don't even know who it was, but it was a guy out of Cornelia that came in and started that subdivision, and he bought it, and did all those things. And even if he had put a master, and I think they used the term experimental subdivision. I'm not familiar with that. I didn't know that was a thing. Maybe it's we're going to try different things. I don't know what an experimental subdivision is.
I don't either.
Anyways, if that property got foreclosed and the bank, whoever did the loan on it, when that developer came in, and let's say he sold 3 houses, and those 3 houses that were bought had those covenants on it. The bank didn't take those 3 lots back, so those 3 lots are still subject to those covenants, okay? And then the bank sells it to somebody else who comes in and buys the rest of the subdivision, and the bank doesn't mandate that those covenants be put on that property because the guy who's going to come in here and get this property off the bank's books says, I'm not buying it if I'm subject to these covenants.
Yeah.
So then they get to go in there and make up their new rules for what they're going to do. Because maybe those covenants only required a 1,600 square foot house, and they want to come in and build a minimum 1,800 square foot house. Yeah. So I don't really know what the backstory was behind these rules apply to this person, this one applies to that person, but I do know that typically your developers who are going to be like your Class A members they're not subject to the same rules that a Class B member is in a development like that, which is somebody who is ultimately and subsequently bought one of the lots from the original developer.
Yeah. So if I was a developer and I came in and did all these restrictions and had 20 lots, whatever it would be, in that subdivision, and then I sold 3 and I said, I got this one restriction in here that's keeping me, whatever it might be, from selling the rest of these because I shouldn't have put it in there in the first place. Can he go? He can't go back and change it, can he?
There has to be, depending on what his membership rights are in that subdivision, because typically you have to have a certain percentage agreement to change covenants. So if he owns more than a certain percentage, and whatever that percentage is in that development, if he's an owner of more than that certain percentage that's required, then he can change it.
And it really depends what the articles of incorporation for that particular HOA say.
Right.
So that's more legalese, which again, for a buyer, that's why it's really important to hire a good person to represent you, a great realtor to represent you that will actually look at the covenants, that understand this is what you're subject to, this is what you're not subject to, this is what can happen, this is what you get to avoid, because the other part of that is those covenants and restrictions protect the neighborhood.
They do.
They keep a lot of things from being in the neighborhood that shouldn't be in the neighborhood.
Right.
And it's sometimes it's silly. Sometimes it's flagpoles and basketball goals. But sometimes it's really good stuff. Like you can't have abandoned cars. You can't have cows in your backyard.
I mean, it's all good.
There can be some good things with that too.
Well, I think the concern came up was and I think if I know, and again, I may be speaking out of school here, but I think the concern there was that when that development originally went in, it was advertised as 1 acre lots. It's going to be a development of 1 acre lots, okay? And when that original person or whoever owned it didn't and started it and marketed that originally as 1 acre lots, that was what, but then when that ownership changes hands and they are no longer the Class A member and they sell the entire development over to somebody else, and then that person now owns that majority ownership in that development, they can go in there and change it.
But I thought the covenant stayed with the property no matter who owned it.
You can change the covenants for the development. You can amend those covenants.
Which is not fair. It's not fair to those owners who went in there and initially bought the property based on the covenants set forth.
And their properties are still subject to those covenants because that person can't change. They can't change the restrictions on their particular lot. But if it's a neighborhood development, and again, I don't know the whole story behind what was going on there, so I don't want to speak too much to that. But I think that if somebody just marketed it as we're going to have 1 acre lots and we're going to have covered mailboxes and this, that, and the other, and then that person didn't follow through on those things and they didn't see that development through to completion, and there's something that's within the boundaries of the state requirements and what the county can do, and they can change it. I mean, I don't see
Let's talk a little bit about homeowners associations. I know that was talked about. Now, I see the county wanting to approve that. That makes sense because you don't want them to set rules in the homeowners association and then change it in the middle of it and mess everybody up that thought these rules were. So it is good for the county to look at this and approve those. Is that correct? I'm not that familiar with homeowners associations, by the way.
So don't confuse homeowners associations with protective covenants.
Okay.
Because it's two different things.
Yeah.
Covenants are they are covenants that run with the land.
Okay.
They are the requirement, and they're recorded on the property itself.
Which are very similar to deed restrictions. So deed restrictions that run with a piece of property that say it can only be with this family member, or it can only be this, and it can only be used for this. The covenant
No mobile
restrictions
homes,
are
no
the
chicken
same as
coops, that
deed
kind of stuff.
restrictions.
Right. So protective covenants are the same thing. They're basically a restriction on the property. A homeowners association is who enforces those covenants.
Right.
Okay. And typically, a development of 25 or 50 homes doesn't have somebody on staff. So this is all volunteer work.
Right.
Okay. These
Right.
are people that live in the property or homeowners that are in the community, and they are just trying to enforce it. So if you talk to anybody who has been part of a homeowner association for any length of time, you're probably going to hear them say, "Oh my God, how did I get stuck with this?" Because the president, the treasurer, and the secretary are all the same person,
Oh, really?
and the vice president is the wife. So they all sit around their kitchen table at night and decide what they're going. How are we going to get everybody to follow the rules here?
Right.
Then you got to get. Then they got to sue. Threaten to collect the assessments. Then they got to manage it. It's
HOAs they're a Pandora's box.
Oh,
They really are.
Again, the good part of it is it keeps the neighborhood. You keep the neighborhood uniform and makes the neighborhood look like it's supposed to look and like everybody wants it to look.
Right.
The downside of that is not everybody always wants to do that, so you have to have somebody.
And what we're seeing happen in a lot of areas, and it's probably ultimate, and it's already happened here in Hartwell because I've seen a lot of them that it happens. The HOA ends up outsourcing management of the HOA, so they have a real estate broker that manages, or a property manager that comes in, and they're the ones that invoice for the dues, and then of course they're not doing it for free.
Right.
So then that only ultimately increases what your annual HOA fees are, because now they're having to pay somebody. And then when people don't cooperate and people do violate the covenants, then there's litigation involved. Then they got to get so it can be.
So can the county set rules for homeowners associations before they get started and tell them, here's what's in our ordinance and here's what we require from
Right.
homeowners associations? Are they allowed to do that?
I mean,
I'm
from
not
a
an attorney, so
I'm not an
I'm not
attorney.
gonna
and
answer that.
I've never set up an HOA, but from
Yeah.
a logical standpoint, you'd think they would be able to. But I don't know. That's an attorney question.
Yeah. I mean, I think somebody can put whatever restrictions they want to on a property if they're the ones doing it.
I mean, if the county says you can't build greenhouses, then the
Right.
HOA could probably require that all greenhouses are built in the subdivision.
All right, so I own a half-acre lot now, and I know it's okay because I'm grandfathered in and I can do whatever I want to with it. But if I want to sell that half-acre lot after they, let's say, make it 1 acre, now can somebody buy my 1.5 acre?
Absolutely, because it's already subdivided. They're just not approving. What the moratorium is they are not going to approve anything less than 1 acre during this next
subdivision.
180 days to subdivide a piece of property to less than 1 acre.
Okay.
During this moratorium until they get it.
So
figured out.
what they're trying to do now in 180 days is to figure out what's best to do.
Right. And and again, I'm all about controlled growth. I'm all about managed growth. I'm not necessarily about controlled growth. I think that coming in and going, boom, this is the decision. It's not been put out for public, input or anything at this point, which I understand to change it officially, it's got to be heard 3 times. But them stopping it for 6 months when we're already in the middle of a housing shortage and we've got people who are here and prepared to come in and help start building homes, I think that the moratorium more should have been, maybe we look at this on a case by case and let's just look at this and make sure that this is going to meet what we're trying to accomplish for this managed growth.
Right.
And not necessarily, again, just pull
The
an
hard
arbitrary.
stop.
Yeah, don't just pull an arbitrary 1 acre number out of the sky whenever that doesn't even line up with what the state says is okay. Because the state says half acre of usable soil is sufficient. Okay. So what's the county to do? I mean, who's the county to come in and say that it's not?
I don't know. So if you're looking at the marketing of that property, when it goes to 1 acre, is it going to be probably be better to market the 1 acre with the house on it compared to these 1.5 acres? Is that
Not necessarily.
Better in what regard? Because quite honestly, it makes it more expensive. And we talked about that in the first show.
Okay.
That when that acre is more expensive than a half acre. And then is that acre plus the house going to be out of reach for a lot of the folks here in Hart County? And that's a serious question that you've got to ask.
And here's another question that comes up. you worked for, again, how many years in the banking industry?
105.
What time?
120.
How many times did you come home at night and you were tired, and you had a board meeting after hours or whatever? Then you had to go to some chamber networking thing, and Wendy was at the school and all these things, and y'all got home at night, and guess what you got to do? You got to cut your grass.
Right.
So now instead of somebody having a half acre they have to keep up, now they have a whole acre they have to keep up.
I see.
Somebody don't necessarily want to have to be able to come in and cut a 1 acre yard.
I see.
So a lot of times that's actually a deterrent for people wanting to buy those properties, because they're ideally, most likely what's going to happen, they're going to cut around their house, especially if they just continue on and they just go further back and make to meet the 1 acre requirement, because now we've met your requirement of your moratorium. I don't have any additional property usable space. I just have a yard back there that I'm not going to cut. So I'm going to cut around my house, and then the neighbors are going to be complaining because there's mosquitoes and there's field mice that are running in because they're letting it get yay high, because they're not going to come in and cut it, and then they bush hog it. They get somebody to come in and bush hog the backs of. I mean, there's a lot of things that'll come into that, because again, what the change in what I'm aware of what happened at North Point is that the road frontage was there. They met all the requirements that the county has, 60 feet on the road, this, that, and the other. I mean, they met all the requirements, and they moved them to a half acre, and they approved it.
Yeah.
So that piece of it that was a big issue at the meeting the other night, that's not even going to change.
Right.
And I think
It's already
maybe,
been approved.
and I think maybe the other piece of that, because if I look at me being from Nashville, and I look at Davidson County, you think of Nashville as just being a city, but there are parts of Davidson County that are agricultural.
Very agricultural.
And that are rural, that'll never be residential. And so that's another piece I think for the county to address is, let's look and see what areas we never want developed. We want to keep that agriculture. We want to keep this farmland. What areas are available?
But
To
does
build
that
homes.
get into the, I'm about to get killed when I say this word.
You might be.
Zoning.
And zoning,
Oh,
zoning can be a
kill me.
solution.
Don't kill me.
Yeah.
I mean, is zone, but
Don't
but,
shoot me.
I think that zoning is a great idea. I mean, because a lot of counties, we see that. I see that happen in a lot of the other areas where we are. Morgan County, Greene County, Putnam County, Madison County has it, where you've got, just like within the city, you've got certain different zonings within the city. Okay, you could have residential areas. You could have areas that are going to remain commercial.
Always
Because what
agriculture,
you've got right
always
now
commercial.
is you can be right down here down Ridge Road or Old 29 or right there on the lake, and you can have these beautiful homes, and somebody, because there's no zoning in the county, there's nothing to stop somebody from coming in and putting a catfish farm in there if they got a pond on it. I mean, there's nothing to stop it.
So what's the other side of the coin? Because they tried that one time and the place went nuts.
really,
Oh, yeah. And it was like, it wasn't good. Anyway, they didn't like zoning, so it got voted down. So I don't want to bring that word up. I'm sorry.
I didn't know that was
hot
the
button.
trigger point.
Yeah.
I didn't know that was a hot
It's
button.
like bringing up taxes. Y'all want to increase taxes? No.
No, they don't do that either.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
I mean, we've got.
the word
Don't call it
zoning.
zoning.
Don't call it zoning.
Yeah, let's call it. What can we call it?
I call it managed growth.
Call it managed growth.
Areas.
Oh, don't say that, because then they're going to be accusing the board of
Number
of
one.
zoning.
You could number one through 6 and just call it areas.
All right, next question is, all right, so an investor has a loan at a bank right now, and he's got 60 acres, and he planned on putting a subdivision in there with quarter acre lots in there. Now they're going to, this moratorium, they don't have the plat. yet.
Right, because I haven't been filed, I haven't been approved yet,
Yeah,
right?
haven't
So
been
they're
filed
shut
and
down.
approved.
Yep.
So what's the bank and the investor going to do in that situation?
Again, I think
Make a phone
that
call to the bank.
I think that a Pandora's box has potentially been opened,
Mm-hmm.
because I think there were a lot of things that, and a lot of people who already have things in process that were going with no advance notice whatsoever of this. There might have been conversations about it that happened that were ongoing, and they might, but again, there's a process that has to happen.
Yeah.
You got to get somebody out there to do soils. You've got to get somebody to lay out, a preliminary plat of how could we make this work. That takes time to do it right. Because what they're not wanting
And it's not free.
is it rushed in, and it's not free. There's been a lot of money spent, but people are going through the proper steps to do this correctly, according to the way it's supposed to be done, and then boom, we're at a stop now.
So that investor that has his 60 acres, but has not had his subdivision plat completed with his quarter acre lots.
Have 1 acre lots.
I mean, 1 acre lots. He had it planned, and the bank approved the loan on the quarter acre lots, and now he's got to go back to 1 acre lots, which is going to mess up all the cash flow and determine if that, if they sell it, is he going to be able to pay for it?
Right.
What's that poor soul going to do?
Either he sells the land.
I would venture a guess if that's been happening, they've already been in contact with an attorney. And again, we're not attorneys, so I don't know what that is. But
and it
now
been
all
approved.
the work that's been done,
yeah. And
now they have to go back and redo that layout if they want to continue moving forward with this prior to the 6-month moratorium, which at the end of the 6-month moratorium.
What I said is not grandfathered in.
Right.
I know it's
That's
not.
correct.
Right, that's what I'm saying. So now they have to go back to
the drawing
whoever
board.
did their preliminary layouts. Now we've got to redo all the layouts based on 1 acre lots, which obviously decreases their yield.
Well, I guess they sell them for more money, though, on the other
They
hand.
build a different house.
The builder comes in, the developer comes in and says, there's not a big enough difference if it's still just one buildable lot. There's not a big enough difference of what I can't ask double the price just because I went from half acre to 1 acre. Because there was already a lot of half acre lots out there, and there was already a lot of 0.8 acre lots out there. So I mean, there's really not I don't know. To me that's a very real
and it may not be out
consequence of making a decision and a change just like that. That there was already things that were in process happening.
Okay.
And I don't know who that is. I mean, that may have been just hypothetical you're talking about.
It's hypothetical.
But, yeah.
I just made it up.
It's certainly a process. It's a certainly
But it's also a
process.
reality because, again, we've got a lot of growth that's happening in Hartwell. We've got a lot of new people here. There are a lot of people looking for housing. And there's a lot of builders that are coming here with the ability and the funding, and they're going through this process with their banks to be ready to do this.
Right.
And accommodate the growth.
Well, Wes has given me the signal again.
Man, that went by fast.
It did go by fast. So, Christy and Aaron, I want to thank both of y'all for being on the show again. And before we end it, of course, I want you to give us contact information for anybody who wants to get in touch with you. So do that one more time for me, and we'll end the show.
All right. I'm going to let you do it this time. I did it last time.
That's what I was thinking.
Okay.
So my name's Aaron Dwyer. This is Christy Dwyer. And again, we're the owners of Exit Realty Lake Country. We have an office in Hartwell. We have an office in Brazelton, Madison, Milledgeville, and also down at Lake Oconee. Also have one outside of Tennessee. If you want to reach either one of us, you can get us at 706-377-3948. You can reach us on our website at exitrealtylakecountry.com or sellingthelakecountry.com. So thanks again.
Now,
Thanks
you're not
for
a
having us.
Tennessee fan, are you?
I'm not.
Oh, good.
That's why they let me stay.
Yeah, that's right. So anyway, I want to thank you again. Wes, thank you, and thank all my viewers for watching Money Talks, and I'll see you next time.